September 6th, 6:45 a.m. A convoy of unmarked vehicles crept through the back roads of South Lanarkshire. But this wasn't a raid on a rural property. It was the beginning of a coordinated crackdown on one of Scotland's most elusive and violent drug cartels, run by Jamie the Iceman Stevenson and the Gillespie brothers. For years, they'd operated in the shadows, moving Class A narcotics with industrial efficiency, all while living like ghosts. No online footprint, no paper trail, just encrypted phones, offshore handlers, and millions laundered through gold and construction. And yet, somehow, they stayed off the radar. Until now. What you're about to hear is a story of brutal enforcement, encrypted betrayal, and global smuggling worth over £100 million. You probably can't even imagine the full scale of it. So before we get started, I'll ask you to subscribe to the channel and put a like on the video if you really like what I'm doing. Let me know in the comments what shocked you the most when you finish watching. Jamie Stevenson had already made a name for himself back in the 2000s as a ruthless lieutenant in the Scottish underworld. He was first jailed after being caught with a massive £1 million heroin shipment during the Operation Folklore investigation. But prison didn't kill his ambition, it sharpened it. Upon release, he re-emerged with deeper contacts, stronger discipline, and a colder temperament, hence the nickname, the Iceman. Around the same time, James and Barry Gillespie were growing their own network out of Rutherglen. Brothers by blood, their personalities couldn't be more different. James was brash and loud, while Barry was methodical and silent. Together, they offered Stevenson something unique, scale. And Stevenson? He offered enforcement. What do you think pushes men like this to build multi-million-pound empires and vanish into the wind? When the Gillespies and Stevenson formed their alliance, it wasn't sealed with handshakes. It was encrypted. Their entire empire ran through EncroChat, a military-grade communication system that, for years, allowed Europe's most dangerous criminals to operate like CEOs. Every drug shipment, every hit order, every internal beef was typed out on modified smartphones that self-wiped on command. But in 2020, everything changed. French and Dutch cybercrime experts quietly infiltrated the EncroChat network. Without alerting users, they cloned the system and began siphoning messages in real time. Hundreds of thousands of messages. And that's when they stumbled across something deeply disturbing. Messages discussing kilos of cocaine hidden in industrial machinery. Mentions of corrupt port officials. Orders to make someone disappear. A murder-for-hire menu, complete with prices. What began as intelligence gathering quickly became a criminal jackpot. The Gillespies used code names like Spoon and Scotch. Stevenson's nickname, Iceman, appeared across dozens of chats, coordinating logistics, warning of snitches, and ordering violence. They weren't just buying product from Albania or the Netherlands. They were middlemen between Colombian cartels and UK-based street crews. One chat detailed a delivery of 40 kilograms of high-purity cocaine from Rotterdam to Falkirk, with a street value approaching £4 million. Another message, chillingly casual, outlined how to dissolve a body using chemicals sourced from a contact in the Highlands. The Iceman himself was directly linked to a warehouse near Motherwell, where tracking devices were fitted to rival vehicles, and torture kits were stockpiled for persuasion work. It was all there. Every secret they thought was safe was now in the hands of law enforcement. The walls had ears, and the network that once protected them became their undoing. So how did seasoned criminals get so comfortable texting about murder and millions like they were placing lunch orders? The scale of their operation was staggering. This wasn't a gang shifting ounces. It was an international syndicate functioning with the precision of a logistics firm. At its peak, the Stevenson-Gillespie alliance controlled a distribution line that ran from South America through the Netherlands, into Spain, and finally across the English Channel into Scotland. Customized lorries, hidden compartments, and coded drop-offs kept the flow constant. Cocaine, cannabis, heroin, you name it, they moved it. Port connections in Antwerp and Rotterdam ensured that multi-ton shipments could arrive disguised as machinery or household goods. From there, Albanian traffickers, operating under their own brutal hierarchy, managed the mainland handovers. Back in Scotland, the Gillespies' local crew handled distribution through a network of safe houses and rented storage units. Payment was handled through Hawala systems and luxury goods trades. Rolexes for coke, Bentleys for silence. In one case, a shipment of 40 tons of cocaine, valued at nearly £100 million, was traced to a warehouse in Motherwell. The drugs had been hidden inside commercial cement mixers, clean, untraceable, and ready for rapid unloading. The warehouse was leased to a front company registered under a dead man's name. Inside, police later found encrypted laptops, loaded firearms, and a list of license plates, suspected to be targets. Even when a load was intercepted, it barely made a dent. The operation was so well capitalized, they simply wrote off the losses. The Iceman ensured continuity, while the Gillespies diversified risk, different ports, different drivers, even different phone models for different types of conversations. And yet, no one ever really saw them. They didn't flaunt wealth, no Instagram flash, just quiet money and deep shadows. How do you dismantle a supply chain that's built to function like Amazon, but deals in death instead of delivery? The Gillespie brothers were paranoid, but not paranoid enough. As their network expanded, so did the number of enemies. Rivals were circling. Assassination attempts became routine. In 2015, James Gillespie narrowly survived a botched ambush near Glasgow. A bullet missed his head by inches. That was the final warning. Within weeks, both brothers vanished from Scotland. Interpol believed they had fled to Brazil under false identities. But even in exile, their control didn't loosen. Through EncroChat, the Gillespies continued directing operations with eerie precision, giving orders from thousands of miles away. Surveillance suggested they were living in luxury high-rises in Sao Paulo, protected by local cartel affiliates who owed them favors. One message, sent from a handset pinging off a Rio tower, read, "Keep the Glasgow boys moving, and tell Spoon if he asterisk us up again, it's his neck." But their communication would be their downfall. Once EncroChat was cracked, law enforcement could finally prove something they'd long suspected. The Gillespies were not just survivors, they were still shot callers. They ordered shipments, paid hitmen, and even greenlit torture sessions from afar. Their words were no longer whispers. They were admissible evidence. Even more shocking were the details that surfaced about how the brothers laundered money. Gold bars smuggled in through Turkish couriers, crypto wallets shuffled through VPNs. One of Barry Gillespie's aliases was traced to a purchase of a yacht in Panama. Another controlled a Scottish construction company bidding on government contracts. While the men were ghosts, their fingerprints were everywhere. Despite international arrest warrants, the brothers remain officially at large to this day. No confirmed sightings, no arrests, just messages, frozen in time, describing crimes with brutal clarity. What kind of power must you feel to run a drug empire across continents and still sleep soundly in a Brazilian penthouse? While the Gillespies vanished, Jamie Iceman Stevenson stayed exactly where he was, deep inside the UK's criminal bloodstream. He never fled. He didn't need to. By then, he had built a different kind of reputation. If the Gillespies were the money, the Iceman was the blade. Stevenson wasn't flashy. He didn't need 10 cars or luxury villas. What he needed was control. His job was to maintain order, silence leaks, and keep the empire moving through fear. And he did it well. From a compound in South Lanarkshire, protected by dogs, cameras, and loyal enforcers, Stevenson operated like a wartime general. A recovered EncroChat message showed him giving explicit orders. That one who spoke, silence him properly this time, no more warnings. Police believe Stevenson was linked to at least 4 violent incidents involving suspected informants, rivals, or rogue couriers. In one case, a man's car was found burned out with his remains inside, deep in the Trossachs forest. The cause? He lost a parcel of heroin en route from Merseyside. Stevenson also oversaw the gang's weapons stockpile. A raid in 2019 uncovered automatic rifles, Glock pistols, and over 3,000 rounds of ammunition in a storage unit tied to one of his shell companies. There were also military-grade jammers and encrypted routers used to shield conversations from surveillance. The implication was clear. This was not just a drug syndicate, it was an armed militia. Even hardened gang members feared the Iceman, not because he shouted, but because he didn't. His silence made every order sound like a verdict. The few who crossed him vanished, literally. Their names never appeared in police databases again. What kind of man builds an empire through cold calculation? And what does it say about the system that allowed him to operate this long without consequence? Despite the millions flowing through their hands, the alliance between Stevenson and the Gillespies was always one thread from snapping. At first it worked. The Iceman enforced. The Gillespies expanded. But power, like money, corrupts, and encrypted chats began revealing cracks in the empire. In one exchange, James Gillespie accused Stevenson of taxing their own couriers, demanding a cut from shipments he had no stake in. Stevenson, in response, hinted at burying 2 problems in one grave. The digital paper trail showed a slow unraveling. Trust eroded. Orders overlapped. One disturbing message uncovered during Operation Venetic read simply, "Spoon is playing both sides. Make it end." What followed was a bloodbath behind the scenes. Several low-level operatives disappeared within months of each other. One was a mule caught short at Dover. Another was a debt collector who failed to return a parcel. Police later linked the disappearances to coordinates typed in by Stevenson himself. Grid references to remote forested areas in central Scotland. And then there was the Glasgow incident, 2020. A man known only by his EncroChat handle, Blackwing, was shot 3 times outside a bar in Govan Hill. Surveillance suggested he was the Gillespies' proxy, someone they were grooming to edge Stevenson out. He survived, but the message was unmistakable. Even the cartel's European suppliers noticed. Messages sent from contacts in Utrecht and Antwerp urged them to settle internal matters or risk being cut off. One Dutch supplier warned, "Too much heat, too many bodies. Keep it clean or it's over." What began as a tight alliance of necessity had descended into encrypted warfare. And all the while, investigators were watching, reading, cataloging each threat, each plea, each murder order, waiting for the right moment to strike. What happens when you build a criminal empire so big it starts devouring itself from the inside? While the Syndicate quietly imploded, the National Crime Agency moved in silence. This wasn't a rushed operation. It was a years-long chess match, coordinated across borders, with every surveillance camera, drone, and undercover asset pointed at one target, dismantling the Stevenson Gillespie empire without triggering full-blown underworld retaliation. Investigators used decrypted EncroChat messages as a roadmap, cross-referencing names, locations, and drop points. Surveillance units were planted near garages, storage units, and even construction sites linked to shell companies. Assets in ports across Rotterdam, Felixstowe, and Leith quietly flagged suspicious cargo. Financial analysts traced shell accounts bouncing through the Isle of Man, Dubai, and Sao Paulo, One transaction, 480,000 pounds in crypto, was tagged to the purchase of uncut cocaine, paid in advance before it even left the Colombian coast. But the real breakthrough came when the NCA flipped an insider, a former driver who had been taxed, beaten, and left for dead after botching a courier job. He gave up routes, names, even hideouts Stevenson personally used for planning meetings. Armed with this intel, police raided multiple sites in coordinated fashion. In one raid in Lanarkshire, officers discovered 600,000 pounds in cash, 6 encrypted phones, and a bulletproof vest with the initials JS stitched into the lining. Stevenson was finally arrested in a pre-dawn operation while hiding in a luxury apartment linked to a shell property firm. No shootout, no resistance. Just a man in a tracksuit, expressionless, caught by the very system he thought he'd mastered. Meanwhile, international warrants were issued for the Gillespie brothers, but Brazil's complex extradition policies and the brothers' likely use of cosmetic surgery made locating them near impossible. The empire had fallen, but slowly, surgically. It was law enforcement's most delicate takedown in a decade. What does it say about our institutions when justice for 100 victims comes down to one flipped courier and a hacked phone? With Stevenson behind bars and the Gillespie brothers vanished into South America's underworld, one question lingered. What happens after a 100 million pounds empire collapses? The answer: chaos, silence, and a power vacuum that still hasn't been filled. Investigators combed through the ruins. Encrypted phones, charred ledgers, USB drives buried in floorboards. What they found was a syndicate so deeply embedded in British infrastructure that even now, fragments continue to surface. Safe houses in Glasgow still turn up forgotten caches of narcotics. In Spain, weapons traced to the gang are appearing in separate gangland killings, and financial assets, properties, gold bars, crypto wallets, are still being uncovered from Edinburgh to Dubai. Some of the gang's junior operators have flipped, offering intelligence in exchange for shorter sentences. Others have tried to seize power in Stevenson's absence, but none have matched his cold authority. The Iceman, now serving a lengthy prison term, has remained mostly silent, refusing to name associates, refusing to break. The Gillespies, as of today, they remain ghosts. Occasionally, a sighting is reported in Medellin, or whispers emerge from Sao Paulo's favelas about 2 British bosses protected by local cartels, but no confirmed capture. They continue to be among the UK's most wanted fugitives. In Scotland, the legacy of their empire lingers like fog. Young men with encrypted phones trying to imitate giants. But what they forget is that this empire wasn't just built on cocaine. It was built on fear, precision, betrayal, and ice-cold leadership. This empire was collapsed, but as soon as one is destroyed, a new one is born. Somewhere right now, a new drug trafficking empire is rising, and we have to fight it. They built a cartel as cold and efficient as any in Medellin, using encrypted phones, ghost companies, and hit orders like email. Now the leaders are ghosts, but the shadow remains. If this is how far Scotland's underworld reached, what else don't we see?